end of the world and subsequent post-apocalypse tend to be portrayed in a hectic manner. It makes sense, as mass destruction usually takes place with a bang, but eventually, inevitably, things would get quiet. Lone Survivor, developed by Jasper Byrne, examines what happens once the world has settled into its disaster. It's a subdued, trippy take on survival horror that should not be missed. Lone Survivor finds you in the shoes of an unnamed protagonist who's currently surviving day by day in a small apartment. It seems that some sort of virus has wiped out most of the population, leaving our player character isolated and quickly losing his sanity. Upon examining a map outside of his home, our protagonist notices a marked room and decides to venture forth to see what he can find. From there, you begin to realize that you may not be the only one still clinging to life. The story of Lone Survivor is mostly told through the narration of the protagonist as he talks to himself. He's likable, but it's clear as the game progresses that his mental stability is fading fast. Peppered throughout are scenes of hallucination that hint at what may have happened to you before the events of the game. It's often difficult to tell if what you're experiencing is real, which lends the game a disorienting unpredictability akin to fellow horror franchise Silent Hill. The dialogue is quirky and often sounds dreamlike. Don't expect a grand story featuring a ragtag band of survivors. This is a more intimate experience, focusing intensely on the psyche of just one man. I found this to be a refreshing take on the genre, one that held my interest for the entirety of the experience. Intimate also is the scale of Lone Survivor, mostly confined to the apartment building in which you begin. General progression consists of exploring the various rooms while acquiring key items to advance past various locked doors and barricades. The building is also full of mirrors that act as fast travel points back to your bedroom. Unfortunately for you, the sickness plaguing this world doesn't just kill, it creates monsters. As you explore the world, you'll encounter numerous enemies looking to add you to their ranks. They animate with inhuman-like twitches and will charge at you as soon as you come within close enough proximity. You can use stealth tactics to avoid enemies, like baiting them with rotten meat and sneaking behind them, but thankfully, you're also capable of pumping them with some lead. You'll acquire a handgun early on, which will prove invaluable in your fight against the infected. That being said, it is possible to complete the game without firing a single shot, so if you prefer to take the pacifistic route, good luck. Ammunition is scattered throughout the building, but sparsely enough that you need to make every shot count. Beyond bullets, various consumables are also strewn around, waiting to be found. From crackers to squid, these food items play an important role, as eating them will replenish your health. Be careful though, as some food may have gone bad, actually harming you instead. In addition to its expected function, food also improves the protagonist's mental state, as he'll begin to complain about hunger the longer you go without feeding him. Sleep is also important, obtainable at the bed in your apartment, which also serves as the means to save the game. As far as I can tell, you don't have to worry about these survival elements. I've played through Lone Survivor multiple times without ever dying from starvation or sleep deprivation, but it does have a bearing on the ending you receive. Lone Survivor monitors virtually all of the decisions you make throughout the game, from which foods and optional drugs you consume to how many enemies you kill. All of your choices determine which of 5 endings you'll receive, with some much more challenging to achieve than others. This unique element adds a considerable amount of replayability to the game, as do the various optional quests and items that can be completed and found, respectively. These aren't huge multi-arc side missions, but there's a surprisingly high amount of secrets to discover for a game that only takes a few hours to complete. There are some items referenced in the game that I've still never found. Lone Survivor does a fantastic job of making itself feel bigger than it actually is. Movement is extremely fluid, allowing you to quickly maneuver through environments, which is a good thing, as there's a fair amount of backtracking present in Lone Survivor. Despite this, I never found myself at a loss for what to do next. Your current objective is always laid out clearly, and the world isn't really big enough to get lost in. Despite this, the map can be a bit disorienting, as it shows a top-down perspective of a 2D environment. Combat is equally smooth. Holding down a shoulder button locks you into place, at which point you can use the right analog stick to aim at one of 3 angles. This allows you to aim for the head if an enemy gets close enough for maximum damage, or to aim at the floor if an enemy decides to try crawling. Enemies typically only take a few shots to fell, but they pack quite a punch, so if you get overwhelmed by more than one, don't expect to stay upright for very long. Thankfully, once you kill an infected, they stay dead for good, so you don't have to worry about wasting ammo on respawning enemies. On occasion, you'll be faced with larger scale creatures, but you'll typically only encounter 2 primary infected types, which seems like a bit of a missed opportunity. Lone Survivor possesses an appealing retro aesthetic that, at first glance, may run in contrast to a survival horror game. I found that the visuals actually enhance the horror elements, with many moments achieving a particularly creepy vibe that may not have landed the same way with the more modern art style. Even the protagonist looks like he's stuck with an unsettling, perpetual smile as he wears his pixelated face mask. You may grow tired of looking at dark, decrepit apartment rooms, but the game does a pretty good job of mixing up the environments as you progress further. The soundtrack deserves particular commendation, with a mix of moody tunes and more upbeat tracks that wouldn't sound out of place at an indie rock concert. It's an interesting hybrid that further contributes to Lone Survivor's unique, odd atmosphere. Lone Survivor is, well, weird. Weird in the best possible way. That type of weird you feel in a dream, where it's difficult to discern what's real, what's an illusion, and what's a threat. That type of achievement can't be boiled down to mechanics or features. It's a sort of lightning in a bottle feat that can be difficult for even the same developer to pull off more than once. As we enter into the month of October, Lone Survivor is a perfect companion to ease you into the season of fear.